Since I became chief executive, I've started a program of visits around the country, and when I do those visits, I always spend part of the day either with Citizens Advice Bureau, Money Advice Trust, Advice UK, the organisations that are really on the front line dealing with consumers who are affected by high levels of debt and who therefore tend to be the users of high cost credit. And this is, for me, fascinating and very important. You meet the people who are really on the front line helping, and I have to say, I'm really, hugely impressed by what they do in dealing with these difficult situations. And it also gives us very important intelligence. Well, we've published today the call for input on high cost credit, and this is a very important piece of work that we will be doing. And there are really two, if you like, origins to this piece of work. The first one is that we're approaching the second anniversary of the introduction of the measures that the FCA took on payday lending. And it's very sensible at this point to review the effectiveness of those measures. So that was a natural thing to do. Secondly, and really emerging partly out of the work that the Competition and Markets Authority have done, and we've agreed with the Treasury Select Committee and Parliament, that we will carry out a review of the whole range of high cost credits, including unauthorised overdrafts, for instance, which is one of the particular points to come out of the CMA work. People talk about the so-called waterbed effect here. That is, you take action on one part of the high cost credit world. So imagine you push down on one piece of the waterbed, and you run the risk, because in waterbeds it actually happens, but you run, in our world, you run the risk that it pops up in another part. And of course, there's a reason for that. There's a very legitimate need for credit in this part of the consumer world, and so it makes a lot of sense that we now look at the whole market, the whole scope of this activity, to decide whether it fits with what we would regard as good practice. It is important because the history, as you know, in recent years is that the FCA took on consumer credit from the OFT. We've done a lot, my colleagues, because a lot of this happened before I arrived, have done a huge amount of work to assess the consumer credit sector. It's a very big sector. A lot of it, of course, is well-founded, but I have to say some parts of it, have, when we've looked at it quite carefully, have left us with a lot of questions, and in some areas, frankly, activities which we don't think are appropriate. Now, we've taken quite a bit of action already as part of the authorisation process, because we've reauthorised firms, and we're still in that process. But now is the right time to step back on this particular part of the consumer credit sector and say, let's look at the whole thing in the round. Just to sum it up, there's certainly the evidence is there's been a reduction in the sort of share of payday lending as a proportion of high cost credit. Now, there's some evidence that that's then appearing in other forms of high cost credit. There's also evidence that it's causing people to default on what you might call the sort of primary debt, if you like. That's council tax, utilities, and so on, rather than going into refinancing. So there's more of that. And of course, that's outside our remit, but it's part of the whole story, so we need to understand it. I've also met with the National Illegal Lending team, because one of the concerns, of course, has the payday cap contributed to an increase in illegal lending. I think there the story is there's not great evidence that that's the case, but I think when we think about the actions and the review that we take of the whole sector, we always have to have in mind that we do not want to do anything which will increase the usage and the incentives to use illegal lenders, because that would be a very bad outcome. So sum all of that up, we've got a lot of evidence. It's a fascinating story to understand, and it puts us in a good position to start to do the next phase of the work. We need all the evidence and all the expert views and opinions we can get. So please do participate in this work, because it is very important.